Hi, I'm Ashley Chesnut, author of It's Not Just You, Freeing Women to Talk About Sexual Sin and Fight It Well. And today we're going to go over a tool that I explain in chapter 11 of the book. And the tool is called webbing, as you can see with the web behind me. And what this tool does is it helps us distinguish between the symptom of sin and the root of sin. But to illustrate why this is important, let me tell you a little bit about my 30th birthday. So instead of being 30, flirty, and thriving, I spent my 30th birthday with shingles. Now, it took me a little bit to know that I had shingles. So my symptoms started manifesting really on the back of my neck and the bottom of my scalp. So when I first got shingles, I thought I initially had lice, partially because I had just gotten back from chaperoning our precious students at student camp. And so I got my head checked. I even did a RID treatment just in case, and it didn't help. So then I thought, well, maybe I got bed bugs at camp. And so I started treating myself with antihistamines. I started taking different things that I found at the store. Didn't help. So next, my thought was, well, maybe I have developed an allergy to my hair products. So I got rid of the shampoo and conditioner, got all new hair products, and it didn't help. And it wasn't until I was talking with a nursing friend and telling her my symptoms that she said, Ashley, I think you might have shingles. And when I went to the doctor, he affirmed that was true, that I do have shingles, and he gave me antivirals. And finally, when I started taking medication that was aimed at the root of my issue, my symptoms started going away. Now, how does that relate to this? It relates to our topic because if we are only treating the symptoms of our sin, then the problem won't go away. We have to address our issue at the root. Now, the million-dollar question is, how do we know the root? And this is where webbing comes in. So if we're going to look at how to web, grab a piece of paper, grab a pen or a pencil, and we're going to get started. So first off, draw a circle in the middle of the page. And in that, I start with the sin that the person I'm conversing with is struggling with. So for our example today, we're going to talk about the sin of pornography and masturbation. So this is the sin that this person is struggling with. So I start here and I write that sin in the middle of the web. The next thing that I do is I ask the person to think back to the last time that they acted out, the last time that they viewed pornography, the last time that they masturbated. And as they're thinking back to that last time that they acted out, go back and remember, or try to remember, what were you thinking about? What were you feeling? What was going on as far as situations or circumstances that you can remember? And we're going to list those out, and we're going to start by listing those out as emotions. Because emotions are one word, you can capture it very easily, and emotions are also symptoms. So we're going to identify the next set of symptoms, which are the emotions. So for our example today, I took a couple of common emotions that I hear girls express when they are thinking back to the last time they acted out viewing pornography. So the emotions I have here are fearful, angry, bored, and lonely. So the next thing that I'll do after we've listed these emotions is, okay, out of all of the emotions that we've listed, the things that you were feeling last time before you acted out, which of these was the top shelf? Which of these was the big dog? Which were you feeling the most? And if that doesn't strike you as something you can answer easily, maybe the next thing would be, okay, let's start with whichever one you feel like you can tackle first. And we'll start there. So for our example today, fearful is the one we're going to start with. That was the thing the person was just feeling overwhelmed by before they acted out. Now, once we've identified the emotion we're going to start with, the next thing is to ask the questions, what or why? Because we want to get at, why was I feeling that emotion? So think of yourself like an investigative reporter at this point in time. So what was going on that was causing you to be fearful? What were you fearful about? Why were you fearful? And here, as the person is talking, I'm usually writing this down, or if it is the person themselves that are journaling this, they'll just be noting this. And this is your web. It doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to look exactly like mine. Maybe you're like, I'm a bullet point person or an outline person. This web thing, I'm already confused. So do it in a way that makes sense to you. The point is we want to look at, why was I feeling that way? What was going through my mind? So for our example today, there were two things that came up in this example. So one was that the person was feeling fearful because they were afraid that they would never have a family, and they were afraid that they would never get married. So as this was going on, as they were thinking about these fears, as they were thinking about these desires, the anxiety and the fearfulness just started welling up. And I think about like a tea kettle that I put my kettle on and it starts brewing and it starts getting hotter, and there's more and more pressure within the kettle until the kettle lets out a noise letting me know it's ready. And this is what's going on inside of the person. The anxiety and the fearfulness is just brewing until it gets to a boiling point. And we want to catch it before it gets to the boiling point, but right now we're analyzing what happened leading up to that boiling point. And what was happening was that this person was in their mind just replaying these desires and these fears. I'll never have a family, I'll never get married. Now, we don't want to stop there. We want to dig a little deeper. We're still just at the surface. So as we're digging deeper, why were you so fearful that you would never have a family? Why is that so important to you? Why do you value that so much? So something that came out in this conversation, this example conversation, is that I'm afraid I'll never have a family because that means I'll always be alone. And there's a fear that if I never have a family, then there's going to be no one to take care of me. So you're thinking about security, you're thinking about old age, you're thinking about health concerns or maybe financial concerns, and what is my life going to be like in the future if I'm single? So these are valid fears, valid concerns, but this is showing what thoughts, what beliefs were going on inside of the person. Now they had also said, I'm afraid I'll never get married. So why? Again, the why and the what questions. Why is that so important to you? Why are you afraid that you'll never get married? So here we dig a little deeper and we say, well, I'm afraid I'll never get married because if I never get married, I won't be happy until I'm married. So there's this concern here that happiness is based on a relationship, that happiness comes from having someone. So we're already starting to identify some false beliefs or some false ways of thinking that this person might have. But they also make the statement, I'm afraid I'll never get married because that means that I feel empty and I will always feel empty. And we could keep going, but for our purposes for today and for this example, we're going to pause here because what we want to do at this point, once we have explored the what and the why, and we really have nothing left to say, at least for now, we want to step back and analyze the web. We want to look at everything we just processed. And we're analyzing it to see, okay, what are our values? What's important? What are the desires that I have? What are the thoughts and the beliefs that I have about God, about myself, about other people, about institutions like marriage? And here we're finally getting to the root, the thoughts and the beliefs, the priorities, the values, what we worship. That's at the root of why this person is engaging in pornography and masturbation. This is the why behind their sin. This is the root behind the symptom. And I think here about what counselor and author Paul David Tripp says, and he has this principle of inescapable influence. And this principle says, whatever rules the heart will exercise inescapable influence over the person's life and behavior. So looking back, what is ruling this person's life and behavior? And you see a couple of things here, and I'm not going to be exhaustive. I'm just going to name two. But one is that you see a desire for security, So up here, that I'll always be alone, I'll have no one to take care of me, that's showing the person has a desire for security. And you're also seeing a desire for satisfaction. And so I'll never get married, I'll feel empty. So there's a satisfying, I feel empty, I want to be satisfied. I'll never be happy until I'm married. So there's relational satisfaction. There's probably sexual satisfaction. So there's desires here that this person is wanting to have satisfied. And I'm not saying these desires for security or satisfaction are wrong, but what I am saying is that they are out of place. So when desires for security, satisfaction, or anything else come before our desire for the Lord, we have a problem. And you can see that this desire is out of place in how the person is dealing with that desire, because they're taking that desire and acting out in sin. So how are we coping? And let's analyze our coping. So now that we've identified the roots behind the behavior, how do we address the root? And this is where we're going to come back and we're going to look at Colossians 3. And that is a text that has been helpful for me as I apply this to my own life and as I meet with young women and I am working through sin struggles with young women. And this is important as well because we need to know what the Bible says is true. The Bible is our plumb line. The Bible is what we are analyzing ourselves and what we believe against. And so just because we feel it doesn't mean it's true. Just because we think it doesn't mean it's true. Our thinking, just like our bodies, is affected by sin. It's affected by the fall. So we can think things that are true or false, and we can think things that are rational or irrational. So we need to analyze our thinking. So with Colossians 3, I'm going to take you back to English class, and I'm going to have you pay attention to what the commands are in the verses that I read. So we're going to start with Colossians 3, verse 1. And this says, "So if you have been raised with Christ, seek the things above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God." So what was the command there? The command was seek. So what is it in your life that you are seeking? And is it the Lord? And Paul is even telling us here what to seek and what not to seek. So seek the things that are above, but don't seek the things that are on the earth. So there's going to be a parallel here between verses 1 and 2. So as you think about your life, what your life trajectory, your thoughts, your daydreams, how you use your money, how you spend your time, who you associate with, what does all of this express about your thinking? As we fight against sin at the root, we must evaluate who or what it is we are seeking and pursuing. And so with this, what does reading and studying the Bible look like in your life? Because that is relating to our pursuit, our seeking of the Lord. So what does that look like in your life? And I think about what is required for any relationship to function and to function well, and that is time and communication. So with your relationship with the Lord, are you communicating with him? And that's prayer. And are you listening to him? And that's what you do through his word, through reading and studying it. So are you spending time communicating to the Lord and listening to him by studying his word? So reading and studying the Bible are essential to seeking the things that are above. So now we're going to look at verse 2. So Colossians 3 verse 2 says, "Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things." So set your mind on things above. That's the command here. And so as we're thinking about even today, even this morning or this afternoon or this evening, if you're just looking back on the last 24 hours, what has gone through your mind today? What have you daydreamed about? What have you dwelled on or replayed mentally in your mind? What have you set your mind on today? And is it things that are above or things that are on the earth? This is why the New Testament has several verses emphasizing the importance of renewing the mind. Verses like Romans 8, 5 through 6, which says, "For those who live according to the flesh have their minds set on the things of the flesh. But those who live according to the Spirit have their minds set on the things of the Spirit. Now, the mindset of the flesh is death, but the mindset of the Spirit is life and peace. And Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God." But how do we do this? How do we renew our minds? We see that it's important, but again, how do we practically do that in daily life? So one thing that's helpful here is just to learn to interrupt yourself and to even identify what you're thinking. Now, I don't know about you and where you live, but I have about a 20 to 30 minute commute on my way home from work every day. And on my commute home, there's this mile marker in the road. And by the time I hit that mile marker, my mind has usually had enough time to wander. And so that mile marker is just my checkpoint to myself of, okay, what am I even thinking about? Do I need to continue on this train of thought? Like, is this productive or helpful? And so just even checking in with myself, what am I thinking about? And do I need to continue this train of thought? So identify your thoughts. And then we need to filter and replace. So filtering, I think about Philippians 4:8 as my filter. And so Philippians 4:8 says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any moral excellence, and if there is anything praiseworthy, dwell on these things." So again, the Apostle Paul is telling us what should characterize our thought life. And if it is not pure or trustworthy or excellent or praiseworthy, then it's not where my mind needs to linger. So dwell or think about these things. So how do we change our mind? We change it by replacing what we're thinking about. So there's a replacement principle at work here. So, fun fact here. When you get a song stuck in your head, do you know what that's called? It's called an earworm. So if I get "It's a Small World" stuck in my head, you're welcome, because you're going to have that stuck in your head all day. So if you get "It's a Small World" stuck in your mind, how do you get rid of that song? You replace it with a different one, like "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." So I'm replacing the bad behavior or the bad song or the song I just really don't want to have in my mind today, and I'm replacing it with something else. Now, if I keep looking at Colossians 3, there's a couple of words that Paul has in verses 5-9. And so put to death, put away, put off. I want you to listen as I read this verse and listen for those key words. "Therefore, put to death what belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desire, and greed, which is idolatry. But now put away all the following: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and filthy language from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you have put off the old self with its practices." So think about what it is saying that you need to put to death. And it's saying put sin to death. Now here, this reminds me of what Jesus is saying when he's saying, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, or if your eyes cause you to sin, gouge them out. Now, I am not saying literally do that, but what I am saying is as we're thinking about sins such as pornography or masturbation, I think about some common examples that I've had with young women about radical amputation and what that needed to look like in their life. So for one young woman, that meant that her smartphone, which was her gateway to accessing pornography, that she needed to replace her smartphone with a flip phone. And trust me, that was radical amputation. And it might be for some of you as well. For another young woman, she had a Kindle and she would download erotic material on her Kindle and read it and would masturbate. And so for her, it meant that for a season of her life, she needed to hand over her Kindle to a friend because she couldn't trust herself to use it and to read it and to not read something that was inappropriate. It might also mean that your Netflix account, if it is a gateway for you with watching content that you don't need to watch, that maybe if you can't have self-control with what you watch, you just need to get rid of the account completely. So think back. What is it that I need to put to death? Those are serious words. Put to death, kill it. What do I need to put to death in order to fight sin in my life? Now, Paul doesn't just tell us what to put to death, he tells us what to replace with. And so again, this replacement principle is at work here. And so he says in verses 12 through 14 what to put on. So listen for it. Therefore, as God's chosen ones, holy and dearly loved, put on compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving one another, if anyone has a grievance against another. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you are also to forgive. Above all, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. As we go about our lives, these are traits we need to be cultivating. We're supposed to put them on. We're supposed to cultivate them in our lives and obey this command. And I encourage you this week, read verses 12 through 14. Choose just one of these commands, one of these traits, and try practicing that one intentionally this week. So if you choose kindness, how can you intentionally develop kindness? Consider your family members, your roommates, your classmates, your coworkers. Be proactive. What is something kind you can do for them this week where you are thinking about someone other than yourself? And commit to taking that step and cultivating that trait this week. As you do, you'll notice we totally cannot do any of this on our own. We need the Holy Spirit working in us, changing us from the inside out. Because if it's not transformation from the Lord inside out, then all it's going to be is behavior modification where, like my shingles, you're just treating the symptoms and you're not treating the root. So we need to identify sin and we need to treat it at the root. Now, something else I appreciate about the Apostle Paul and what he's doing in Colossians 3 is that he doesn't just give us commands. He weaves in statements about our future and our identity. And this is not just getting at us at a what to do level, it's getting at us on a heart level and a motivation level. So if I'm thinking about the motivation and what Paul is saying in Colossians, I look at verse 1 where it says, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. And what is this telling us about Christ? It's telling us that he's not dead, that he's not buried in an old tomb. He's alive and he is sitting at God's right hand in a position of power. And the power that you have inside of you is the resurrected power of Christ, which means the power that rose Christ from the dead is the power that lives in you to fight sin. So you are not helpless and you are not hopeless because this resurrection power lives in you. Verse 4, when Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Christ is alive and he will return. And that is such a hopeful statement. When he comes, we're going to appear with him in glory. We have a hope. We have a future. The things that we are struggling with right now are not things that we will be struggling with in glory. We won't be struggling with glory. We will be living to the praise and glory of Jesus Christ. Verse 10 reminds us that we are made in the image of God and that he is our creator. He is our maker. This is who he is. He is the God that spoke the universe into being. And he designed and crafted you just the way you are, and he knows what is best for you. So if you are like this person in this example, if you are single right now, he knows that singleness is what is best for you right now. He has a perfect plan for you. And are you submitting and yielding to his plan and acknowledging his plan for you is better than the one that you have for yourself? Verse 13 says, just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you are also to forgive. So even in all of this, we're to remember what Christ has done, the forgiveness that we have received. We're not to live in shame and guilt. We're to live in the freedom of forgiveness, and that is supposed to affect our relationships with others. And then not only all of this, but I think about how Paul describes these believers in verse 12. And think about all of the things he's told them not to do so far in Colossians 3. And for him to tell them not to do these things means that there was at least some of the population of this church that was actually doing them. So even as he's talking to this group of sinners, he makes a couple of key statements about their identity in verse 12. So he says, therefore, as God's chosen ones, holy and dearly loved. So think about those three statements he makes about identity. He says that they are chosen. They are wanted by God. He didn't have to make us part of his family, but he did. He gives us the opportunity to go from being his enemy to being his child. You are chosen. You are dearly wanted. Then he says, you are holy. These are sinners, but he says you are holy. You are set apart for a purpose, and you are holy because of Christ and his blood. When God looks at you, he sees you through the blood of Christ. And that is how, no matter how sinful you are or have been or will be in the future, he sees you through the blood of Christ and he can say you are holy. And he also says that you are dearly loved. And he feels that way about you. On your worst day, he feels dear love for you. Knowing everything that you have done, he loves you dearly. These things aren't just true about the Colossians, they're true about you and they're true about me as well. So as you apply Colossians 3 to your life, as you identify sin's roots, and as you fight against sin at the root, I pray you will keep these truths in mind. Truths about who God is and truths about how he sees you because of Christ. Thank you.